Is your relationship on the rocks? Do you need some support in figuring out what in the world is going on with you and Bae? Horary astrology is a divination tool similar to reading tarot but different that may be able to provide some insight into your question. In this video, I'll briefly explain what horary astrology is, and I'll take you through an example chart so that you can see what it looks like to use horary astrology to gain insight into relationship questions. Hey homies, my name is Ebony and I am the founder of Homegirl Astrology. So welcome to the Homegirl Astrology YouTube channel where we support Black people in better understanding how astrology can assist them in living out their daily lives. So helping them find more ease and transformation through money, career, relationships, and life purpose. So feel free to like, share, and subscribe and comment below. Thanks for joining us. Horary astrology is an ancient branch of astrology in which an astrologer attempts to answer a question by constructing an astrology chart for the exact time at which that question was received and understood by the astrologer. So the word horary refers to hour. So we can think of the horary chart like a clock that's pointing to different dynamics of the situation and how they're going to unfold over time. So once the question is asked, I will create a chart in that exact moment using the date and time of the question. And then I'm going to look at the chart using the planets as significators for different people or things that are involved in the question. And from that, we'll be able to see how they're interacting with each other to tell you more about the situation as it exists here on Earth. So it's always best to have a natal chart when doing a horary question so that we can cross-reference the birth chart. However, if you don't have one, it's okay. We can still do a horary chart reading. So there are certain types of questions that work better than others as well with horary. However, I'm not going to go into that today. We'll save that for another video so that we can get into a chart and show you how it all works. All right, let's get into our example. So here is our chart. This person came with a specific question. She and her partner had been on the rocks and they got into a huge fight. So she wanted to know if this was the end. Was the relationship over? So typically in a horary question, we wouldn't even really pay much attention to this Pluto in the first house, but it's right there. Right? Pluto's location in the chart can tell us about changes that are kind of brutal and typically outside of our control. So the fact that Pluto is rising, coming up over the horizon in this chart, is not a great sign for this young lady just to start out. So let's get into what we would actually really look at in the horary question. All right, so Capricorn is the rising sign for this chart. It is ruled by the planet Saturn. So with Saturn ruling the first house, Saturn is Lord 1 in the chart. So Saturn is representing our querent. So this is an astrological term for the person who is asking the horary question, the querent. So we'll talk about her. Saturn is in its home sign of Aquarius, retrograde in, this is Saturn. Saturn is in the home sign of Aquarius, retrograde in the second house. All right, so there's an aphorism that we used for when a planet is in its own sign and its domicile in retrograde. A planet that's in its domicile in retrograde is a man who is sick at home. That's what they used to say back in the day. So she's literally crying on the couch, sick and stressed over this situation. So she's usually a very powerful woman, very strong, but this situation just has her out of sorts. So the retrograde placement makes a lot of sense. She's in her second house, so money is on her mind. She lives with her partner, and as a result, there are some financial ramifications for her if a breakup were to happen. She and her partner have both quit their jobs and moved to a new state together very recently. She had saved some money up, but it wasn't to a place where she is feeling comfortable, so she's feeling very hesitant in the second house. She and her money are both represented by Saturn because Saturn also rules the sign of Aquarius, which is interesting because she's an entrepreneur. So her money comes from her. She's in her money. She is her money. And they're both down bad at the end of the day. Her money is there, but she doesn't feel like she's in a state to use it because of just the precariousness of their situation. She's actually been kind of supporting him in a lot of ways. This Saturn is squaring the planet Uranus. Uranus being in the fourth house of home and family. Uranus is a planet of instability. It's a planet of breakages. This is a breakup planet. So if anything's going to break up a home, in the house of home, it's Uranus. So we get a sense that her home is suddenly being destroyed or kind of ripped away from her. So this Uranus is the next aspect that she is going to make. Okay, after she hits Chiron, which is essentially her being wounded by the situation, she's going to end up having her home broken up. Her partner is represented by the moon because the moon rules the sign of Cancer, where the 7th house cusp is found in this chart. And we know the 7th house is tied to partnership and relationships. The moon is in the sign of Leo in the Querent's 8th house of anxiety and fear. So this is her partner's own 2nd house. He's causing her anxiety and fear, but he is focused on his money. So that's why he's here. However, his money is looking better than hers at the moment. The sun here in Leo is representing his money because his money is here in his 2nd house, which is in the sign of Leo. The sun rules Leo. So with the sun being in its home sign, in its domicile, it's as though his money is like a king in his castle. So he's very strong. His money's looking really strong, and it feels like he's able to make big moves. So he might not really need her so much anymore because his money's looking good. The partner who's not in the best shape himself, though, he's the moon in Leo because the moon in Leo is peregrine. And when a planet is peregrine in a chart, it's as though the person represented by the planet can feel as though they're lost in a foreign land where they don't speak the language, they don't have any real support. They feel kind of like a wanderer, essentially. And a lot of this makes sense because, as I said, they had moved to a new state and they didn't really have much of a community so far. So they were just kind of focused on building that community. So all that aside, his money's finally coming in. In terms of the relationship itself, the moon is applying to the opposition with Saturn. So Saturn, again, that's the querent, that's the young lady asking the question. So he's moving to an opposition with her. So he's essentially, things are about to hit the fan between the two of them. He's about to come confront her very soon because he's the moon. The moon moves very quickly. And he's already mentally moving towards the breakup while she's on the couch crying and stressed. Kind of crazy. And his next move after the confrontation is going to be this square with Uranus. So he's also moving towards breaking away, breaking up the home. So the interesting side note here is that his house of desires, that would be his 11th house, which is going to be in the sign of Taurus, ruled by Venus. His house of desires is ruled by this Venus, and she is here in his 3rd house. So Venus can represent a third party when we're looking at romance situations. So it's possible he already had a little boo thing already at this moment on deck, just in the 3rd house, in his house of community. So basically, it's probably best that this thing is not about to work out because it looks like he's about to cheat on her if he hasn't already done so. So based on this chart already, we get the sense that this relationship is toast, right? He's gotten his little money together, perhaps gallivanting about in the community with the new boo. So it's not a great look for our client right now. Maybe long-term it's a great look, but in this moment it looks pretty rough. We also see Mars here at the bending. So in a horary question, when a planet is at the bendings of the moon's nodes, this can represent something that's at a crossroads. And we absolutely see the Mars representing her home, representing her desires and dreams for herself. They are at a crossroads. She's at an inflection point, determining how, or finding out really how things are going to move forward. Because as we said, with this Pluto, it's not like she really has a whole lot of choice in this situation. You can't force someone to stay with you, and it doesn't look like she should stay with this person anyway. But pulling in the declination table, hopefully you can see that. We see that Venus-Neptune is smack dab in the middle of this declination table in a contra-parallel state. And we saw from my previous video on Venus-Neptune that Venus-Neptune is essentially disappointment in love. So that's exactly where things are heading. We also have Pluto again here on the ascendant, and that's a mess. We're aching for a break-in this moment. There are some other things that are really interesting as well about this chart that came out later. So specifically this Neptune on the 3rd house cusp. Not something I would normally look out, but it was interesting to see in hindsight. The 3rd house can also represent siblings. So Neptune representing disappointment. So she found herself very disappointed by her siblings because of the nature of the relationship between her sibling and her partner. So her sibling really disappointed her. And Chiron also can represent wounding. So she felt wounded by her sibling as a result of this breakup and this whole messy situation. And also, the planet ruling the sibling in this chart is Jupiter. And Jupiter's also ruling the 12th house of hidden enemies and self undoing. So she's coming to see her sibling as a hidden enemy as a result of them not having her back in the situation. So there's a lot going on in this chart. You can see how we're able to kind of weave this story together based on where the planets are placed and ultimately get to the point of the question, which was, is this relationship over? Yes, very much so. It's dead in the water. Sometimes it's not as clear cut as this, but this was just, I think, a good example for me to share with you all on how a horary chart reading can go. So I hope you found this to be a useful example of how a horary chart reading can work and what we can see. Horary is not just for love, though. We can ask questions about career, school, money, really any area of life. So if you're interested in booking a reading with me, if you have a burning question, hop on over to homegirlastrology.com to schedule a reading. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to this video and others. Subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment if you found this information to be helpful or at least interesting. Thanks so much. Bye, homies.